Народ, это пиздец, прям возле нас, блядь! Ух, ебать! Банан, блядь!
Або заховайтеся на місцевості.
War. Ukraine is under full-scale Russian attack. No green men, no special camouflage. Right into the heart of the country. Ukraine at this moment is experiencing bombings all over the country. The Ukraine Ministry of Interior speaks of hundreds or even thousands of casualties. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense confirms that the Ukrainian army took up the fight against the aggressor. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskiy declared martial law and appealed to citizens not to panic and to stay at home. But he added, if anyone is ready to sacrifice his life for the country, will be provided with a gun. These are images from Kyiv, where thousands of people are fleeing to the west. Let's briefly follow the initial reports coming out of Ukraine and the world, given that we are now all engaged in an information war and vulnerable to disinformation. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry reports, beginning at 5 a.m. local time, Russia began shelling Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Lugansk, Odessa, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Poltava, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, and Kyiv. Later reports indicate that the entire country is under attack, including its western part. The Ukrainian government further reports that as of 8 a.m., the Russian military had crossed the borders from Lugansk, Kharkiv and Chernihiv. Reports from cities under attack indicate that the humanitarian law of armed conflicts has already been broken. That is, civilian facilities and civilian populations that are not defended have been attacked. The first conclusions of experts are as follows. This is a large-scale military offensive. A missile attack is currently underway, most likely carried out with a sea-launched Kalibr cruise missiles, ground-launched Iskander missiles, and cruise missiles fired by Russian bombers. Targets include airfields, ports, air defense systems, command and control centers, ammunition and food depots, and infrastructure targets. It is a tactical preparation for a grand offensive from many directions, in particular around Kharkiv, but also from the Belarusian side, which de facto means that Belarus has also declared war on Ukraine. Although its president Alexander Lukashenko has said that the Belarusian military is not taking part in the invasion. Moscow's goal is inevitably to crush Ukrainian military's capabilities and fighting spirit as quickly as possible, so that peace can be negotiated by Russia from a position of strength. Very significantly, the Ukrainian embassy in Ankara reported that Ukraine has called on Turkey to close the Bosphorus and Dardanelles straits to Russian warships. Whereas Vladimir Putin, in his morning speech justifying the invasion, spoke of the need to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, a country with a, quote, Jewish president. Rhetoric somehow familiar from history lessons. Putin said that Russia is not planning an occupation, but that the response would be immediate if anyone wanted to prevent it. Diplomatic staff and ministries of all major countries have gone into emergency mode since morning. US President Joe Biden reported that Russia launched an unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine, and, quote, the United States has cut off the Russian government from Western funding. In turn, Beijing reports that, quote, Russia as an independent state can make decisions based on its own interests, unquote. That means China does not oppose Russian aggression, and it's further strengthening the Dragon Bear alliance. Jens Stoltenberg, NATO chief, said, quote, I strongly and decisively condemn Russia's reckless attack on Ukraine that puts countless civilians at risk. Meanwhile, the Baltic states and Poland are calling for triggering NATO's Article 4, which refers to a situation where, quote, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any NATO party is threatened. The European Union, via Josep Borrell, announces the toughest package of sanctions ever imposed. He is echoed by British Minister of State for Europe, James Cleverly. Quote, an unprecedented level of sanctions will be introduced. A day of reflection also comes for Germany. German Trade Minister and Vice Chancellor Robert Habeck spoke about Russia's aggression against an independent state and admits that the West, including his government, was too naive towards Russia. Moreover, he talks about a turning point for German politics in a broader perspective. He adds that Germany will be able to cope without Russian gas. While the foreign ministers of the Baltic states demand that Russia be disconnected from the SWIFT system. The raw materials and financial markets are also experiencing a huge blow. A barrel of oil surpassed $100 for the first time since 2014, whereas European gas prices increased by 41%. On the other hand, the Russian ruble has hit its historic bottom against the dollar, and the Moscow Stock Exchange fell by 50%. This is the most current map of the Russian offensive. The attack is coming from all sides. A unified front line does not exist. The General Staff of Ukraine reports that more than 60 of the available 90 battalion tactical groups of the Russian Federation are involved in the invasion. On the other hand, some analysts such as CNA's Michael Kaufman say this is still only a fraction of the Russian potential. Operations are being conducted from the northern direction, Belarus, eastern Russia, southern Crimea, and probably western Transnistria, although this direction is not fully confirmed. Attacks from the north are being launched towards Chernihiv and Kyiv, from the east towards Kharkiv, and from Crimea towards Kherson and Mariupol. There has been a massive Russian incursion into the country from this direction. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, the main goal of the Russians is to blockade Kyiv and in the south to create a land corridor to the Crimean Peninsula and the self-proclaimed region of Transnistria. The morning attacks were followed by a renewed missile attack on Ukrainian territory after 1 p.m. local time, with civilian and military infrastructure as targets, for which, among others, Kalibr-type missiles were used. The attack from all sides and the lack of clear front forced the Ukrainian side to conduct dispersed defense in all directions of the attack. The battles are being fought, among others, on the approaches to Kherson. Russian soldiers are trying to bypass the city from the east and continue the offensive in the direction of Mykolaiv. The Russians claim that separatist groups from Donetsk and Lugansk have broken through the well-equipped defense of Ukraine forces to a depth of 6 to 8 kilometers. Heavy fighting is going on over the airport of Hostomel near Kyiv. The Russians seized the airfield with an airborne landing force of 200 soldiers, but in the following hours an advisor to President Zelensky reported that the Russian airborne forces had been blocked and, quote, eliminated, and the airfield retaken. Fighting is also taking place in the suburbs of Chernihiv. Belarus, as a part of the Union state, is taking part in the Russian invasion. Its territory is used for missile attacks. 4 ballistic missiles were launched from it. Belarusian military airfields are also used. In Baranovice, where Russian Su-35S and Su-30SM are stationed. There are also places of concentration of armed forces of the Russian Federation, meaning field camps, which were prepared during the recent exercise that ended on February 20th. However, there is no information about the use of Belarusian armed forces. Despite heavy equipment losses, Ukraine's armed forces managed to inflict losses on the Russian side and repel offensive in selected directions. For example, Mariupol, Shastia, and Chernihiv. Furthermore, a Russian platoon from the 74th Motorized Infantry Brigade was smashed and captured. Additionally, some Russian equipment, helicopters and fighter planes were destroyed. According to Ukraine staff, a column of 15 Russian T-72 tanks were smashed in the area of Głuchów, for which Javelin anti-tank guided missiles were used. Recent reports say Russia has lost 7 jets, 7 helicopters, 24 tanks and over 20 pieces of other military equipment. Ukrainian Defense Ministry reports that 350 Russian soldiers were killed on the first day, whereas a spokesman for the Russian Ministry of Defense says that as a result of the Russian armed forces attacks, 83 ground targets in Ukraine were disabled, plus 2 Su-27S, 2 Su-24S, and 4 Bayraktar TB2 were shot down. Ukrainian casualties are unknown, but the official figure is 60 dead soldiers and civilians. The UN reports that about 100,000 people have left their homes because of the invasion. Several thousand have fled outside of Ukraine. Significantly and worryingly, the Russians have seized the site of the former nuclear power plant in Chernobyl. This is not a key site for the Ukrainian state in terms of energy production, so Moscow's motives are puzzling, so it might turn out to be a sabotage action on the radioactive waste located there. In addition, the Russians have unblocked the strategically important North Crimean Canal, which supplies Crimea with fresh water. The peninsula had been suffering from its shortage for months. In the evening hours, there was a slowdown in Russian operations in order to regroup forces. On the other hand, fighting in tactical sections continues throughout the day. However, the latest reports again report heavy fighting for Mariupol. The Ukrainians face a tough night ahead. In the world of diplomacy, there is a clash between hard interests and morality. Which wins? I leave that question unanswered. President Biden in his speech announced a new package of sanctions. However, there is no consensus on cutting Russia off from the global system of international exchange, SWIFT. The estimated cost for the Kremlin is a substantial $80 billion, but this cost would also have to be borne by Western countries. Joe Biden said at his conference that it is the European countries that do not want to cut off Russia from SWIFT. It is Cyprus, Hungary, Italy, and Germany. Nonetheless, Biden says that the American sanctions would be worse for Russia than cutting it off from SWIFT. Meanwhile, in Russia, anti-war protests are quickly pacified by the authorities. However, the ones in St. Petersburg and Moscow have managed to reach significant proportions. Finally, a few words of comment from us. When at the end of November, as one of the first media from the geopolitics niche, we published the material in which we described the possibility of a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, I was horrified by its conclusions. For the next 3 months, we watched the theater of diplomacy and Russian mobilization. Will they attack or not? They will certainly not, because, after all, the media are talking about it. In the era of omnipresent internet and information transferred at the speed of light, it is impossible to hide the repositioning of tens of thousands of soldiers and military hardware. The Russians saw it, and that's what they played. Perhaps all the diplomatic drama we have watched recently was just a spectacle that was never meant to bring any solution. And the decision was actually made even a year ago, when we watched the first movements of the Russian military. We also recorded material about it. Today we cannot do much in the name of solidarity with Ukraine, but we commit ourselves to reliable reporting of the truth that will be effectively drowned out by the fog of war. We are entering the phase of an intense information war. We are going into an emergency mode of our activity. Special reports will appear daily.